We were mostly undeterred. It was certainly disappointing, but the search continued. And at that stage, a local man called Ron Sterry was trying to subdivide a block of land, the old goat farm, on the south side of town. And some blocks became available from that side. And at that stage, my memory of it diminishes somewhat, because by that stage, I think I was stepping off the committee. I do remember at that stage that we must have got funds to purchase that site.
But before that, Bill, there were several sites that we'd also investigated, weren't there? Because I recall at one stage we were looking at moving on to the drive-in, the old drive-in site, for example. And then there were other sites along the Ross River area as well.
That's correct. You're playing around the edges on my memory here a bit, Dave, I have to admit. Yes, I do remember visiting the drive-in site, and it was fairly universally unappealing. To me anyway. I don't know. I can't speak for the whole group. I mean, we all were also a bit desperate by that stage. Yes, I do remember a day where we tramped over a whole lot of sites, and the consensus was that we weren't getting very far. And by this stage, you know, there was a bit of argy-bargy. You talked about tensions early on. The Lands and Building Committee was composed of a fairly disparate group of people who had some, you know, as happens, you get singular views arising, and it was becoming hard to get general agreement. The Ron Sterry land that I talked about earlier, well, it really was a bit of a catalyst. It was, it wasn't considered perfect, but it was considered an option that we could live with, given the reality that we would get funding to help buy that site, and the fact that it was also rather beautiful too.
Well, it was a complete game changer.
Totally. We were really facing a potential brick wall at that stage with our existence as a school. We'd been given marching orders from Araluen. That block of land was available, but we'd got to the end of the year, and I just seem to remember it was a hot summer, and we had to move from Araluen, which included moving a building which we'd built on that site, and we had to get it to Raganisi Road and set it up in time for the beginning of a new school year for it to work. And to complicate matters, we had these beautiful grove of corkwood trees, and right at the beginning of the holidays, a fire went through and demolished this grove of corkwood trees, and it was just like, oh, how are we going to survive? And an example of how, you know, the school can be, sometimes it all rested on the work of one or two individuals who really came to the fore. Sally Mumford was one who had worked out a plan, design, and who remained very much in contact for it. And guy who came forward and did all the, really commanded the logistics of moving on to that school. And he walked around that site in summer with a backpack of water on his back, which he could sip, I remember, and took charge of the placement of buildings, of the digging of lines, did a huge amount of work. He was like site foreman for nearly 6 weeks on that site, unpaid, always there. And he really saved the school's bacon at that stage. I mean, lots of people turned up to volunteer, but he kind of took charge and made sure things happened. So that was Mal Crowley, yeah. And really the school owes its existence in no small measure to Mal Crowley, because it could have all just collapsed at that stage. And that's certainly my impression.